We have begun.
We're live, baby.
So live.
All right. Oh, I see Twitch. And YouTube will take another half hour. Oh, no, there it is. Hey. Hey.
Nice.
Look at that.
All right. I guess we should tweet.
Post.
Oh, you're hosting?
Am I hosting? Oh, I said post, but I
Oh,
guess I
oh,
should
oh.
host. Yeah, now that I know how to do that.
Just host on your Valadria account?
Yeah, why not? Do I have that open? Why wouldn't I do that?
It's an interesting question, right? I mean, that's might as well.
Can you hear my mechanical keyboard?
No,
I
actually no. Your mic does a great job of dropping off any outside sound. You have to be right on that mic. It's when we chat usually, and you get more than a foot or two or so away from the mic, it's your audio drops off significantly. So no, I can't hear anything, and no room noise at all.
Fantastic. That's what I wanted to hear. Great. Wow. Okay. There's really no just like host button or anything, but apparently there is a really easy entryway to host, which is you just go to your own channel into your own chat, which I had to like drill into, and then you just type host, and then you just know the username. I got as a person, especially a programmer who uses lots of command line interfaces. I'm fine with that, but from a UX perspective, that feels pretty buried.
Mm.
And I'm like, I've been using Twitch for years, and I just figured there was a button. Like, can I go do this? I can do the same thing from my own personal one, huh?
Sorry, I'm fiddling with your audio. I'm trying because I think I'm coming through louder in the stream by a little bit so than you. I'm trying to figure out why that is.
Rictor last streamed 10 years ago. I love it. He'll host Super Hackett Rose.
Why won't
Oh,
it?
hey, I can do the Lost Decade one as well.
Just blasted everywhere.
That's the secret to the internet. You just create 10 accounts and you just you have them all pointed at yourself, and then people are like, hey, it's 10 people watching. What's going on over
Right.
here?
Right. Well, yeah.
There you go.
Even on Twitch, you need sock puppet accounts apparently.
Oh, sock puppet account. Okay. Is the term for that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, why wouldn't there be?
That's the term for the when the people get uh busted. I feel like I'm coming through too loud. God damn it. Yeah, people get busted. There's the famous one of the some politician who tweeted something and then he responded to himself with the politician was like a middle-aged bald white guy, and he responded to himself without he forgot to change his account apparently, and he responded to himself with, as a gay black man. That's how he started his
I remember
response.
that. I remember that, yeah.
It's like,
It
you
doesn't get much
moron.
more embarrassing than that.
I don't. It's one of those things where I don't know how you. I don't know how you
Dean,
walk that off.
wait, it doesn't matter. We should not get lost in the weeds here. We should focus on game dev.
We should.
Um, what are we doing here?
Um, I don't know. I'm still sitting here. I'm fixating on audio. I'm having this.
That's
I'm
fine.
having a
All
hard
right.
time overlooking my little meter peeking up into the red sometimes. So hopefully, I'm not
What do we
coming
call it?
across obnoxiously loud.
Emptying the faucet.
Yes.
Hang on, I found that link. Okay, because I know
Mm-hmm.
like people do watch these later, and so if we refer to something we've talked about before, there is someone out there who'll be like, "Oh, cool." So I'm gonna post it.
Okay.
Um, but it was the where did I post that? It was the it's a creativity tip. It was like when you first sit down. Oh, there it is, creativity faucet. When you first sit down to be creative for kind of wastewater, you have to get past that hurdle of like
Ooh.
a bunch of garbage. Anyway, I feel like our streams have that, especially, and we're going to keep talking about those.
Hang on. Your audio just switched sources. You're not
Did
coming
it?
through your good mic anymore. There was like a little stutter, and now your audio is coming through something else. I don't know what.
Yeah.
Oh, try
There
again.
we go. Am I back?
You're back.
I don't know why that happened. And I didn't hear anything on my end. That's strange. Great. Hope that doesn't happen again.
Hope not.
I was gonna say I'll post this in the Discord, but how about the chat? Post it in the chat. I'll say we talk about this a lot. There we go. We do have a Discord, but it's a family Discord. That is not a Discord that should be open to a community. Maybe you should just join the Valadria Discord, bro. Or you could, I don't know, you're Mr. Account Creation these days. You could create a Super Hackett Bros, Discord.
No, no, no. Well, I don't know. Maybe Mr. Account Creation. Yeah, I've also had to go back to work. I was on vacation. I was really productive with all this stuff for a little while with while I was on vacation. Now that I'm back to work, I have less hours in the day. Fewer hours in the day, sorry.
Fewer. That's what
Fewer.
Game of Thrones has taught us.
uh,
Game of Thrones has taught us that you say fewer, and it has taught us that you end strong. You do not bail at the end of a series
oof.
to go think about Star Wars or something else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've said we're going to talk about game dev, but yeah, that's a great point because we've got topics that we want to talk about in terms of like sequels and
Mhm.
aliens and stuff like that. But you know what? Ending strong is another fantastic topic to cover, and I think it does apply to game dev because I can name you a whole bunch of movies and shows where they don't stick the landing, and what it does is it torpedoes the entire damn thing. Like
Mm.
Battlestar Galactica, for example. You watched that, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I have many thoughts. If you want to go into a BSG rant, I'm happy to do it.
Well, I don't know that I was going to go into a rant specifically on that, but
I
like,
might.
but BSG failed it. Game of Thrones didn't stick the landing. The movie AI to me gets so like
Oh,
I love that
that's a
movie
very
to a
good
certain
example.
point, and then at the end it goes and it does just a huge it does a gainer right into a belly flop right at the
Oh
end,
yeah.
and so it kind of retroactively taints the entire 2 hours that came before that, right? Where you're just like you leave the theater just thinking about the last 5 minutes and what the hell just happened in that, and what did I just watch? Never mind that the first hour and 55 minutes before that was awesome, So like, yeah, sticking the landing is super important.
Yeah. It really is too, because it's a lot of times it's the last, like you walk away from the creative work with that ending either in your mind or like the taste lingers in your mouth, so to speak. And so if it's a really terrible ending, you're like, ugh. Even if you enjoyed the rest of the meal, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be hard to ignore. Like, how do you hang on, sorry, I'm distracting myself with oh god. Um, yeah,
Yeah. So
it could.
something I like to do with my games is I like to add pardon me, the beginning and the end right away. Because what I've noticed is if I don't do that, I tend to get lost in the middle somewhere. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're working on games, it's easy to, and you probably should start somewhere in the middle, right? And it's easy to add on a beginning, but then and I've done that many times. But then I start to shoot off in a direction without that ending there. I kind of missed the flag, right? Like there was probably a finish line someplace, and I just went around it and past it and just went off into the woods somewhere. So my next game, I've already built the beginning, which has a little polished intro scene and a tutorial with text that teaches you the controls and stuff. And then there's a middle where you have some tasks you have to do, or else you can't get to the ending. And the ending has both a final challenge, right, or an obstacle, but it also importantly has an ending scene that kind of gives you some finality and closure. And it also rolls the credits. And it's got a flow that takes you right back to that beginning, right? So it's got the complete circle, the beginning, middle, and end. And because I have that stuff all in place, I have a lot of confidence working on that game because all I really have to do is finish that middle part, which is, just That's all. Just make the game, right? Just spend months or years on that part. But, every step of the way, I'm going to have something playable that I can ship, which is great.
Um, so we've talked before, I believe, about Half-Life. Have you played those games?
Oh, it's going to hurt. Don't flail me. No, I haven't. I played Half-Life 2 a little bit. Like I get the gist of it. I remember walking around, there were some things from the ceiling and there was a box and I was like, "Ooh, physics." And it was a helicopter and I think I was on a
Okay.
motorcycle at some point, right? But like I know the fandom around Half-Life 1 and especially 2 is pretty nuts. I get the jokes, right? If you've got a crowbar, I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Right? Like I get the references and stuff,
Crowbar.
but I'm not salivating at the mouth for Half-Life 3. I'm guessing you were a big fan, and as a VR developer, you probably gobbled up. What was it, Alexis,
Alex. Um,
Alex. Sorry,
Half-Life Alex is
Alex.
really what?
Sorry, I don't know if you know that. Alan, Alan, Alan. No, all
No,
right.
what is
Well,
that from?
we'll take care of that later. Go
Okay,
ahead.
okay.
I do want to hear your thoughts about this game.
Half-Life Alex is very good. Um,
Figured.
I mean, the production quality in that game is amazing. The art is fantastic. All of the VR interactions feel really, really good. Um, the problem that I personally had with it is that it's very oppressive. It's they nailed the atmosphere of the Half-Life world, but it means that you're like, um, in fact, if anything, what they did is they played up some of the horror aspects, or rather, maybe some of the sequences that would be fairly quote unquote normal in a flat screen game when you are playing them in VR become very things are very different in VR. And so like what could just be like a dark room and you're just kind of like, whatever, you got a flashlight, move to the dark room, no big deal. In VR, suddenly it's like and it becomes very, very like you're slowly plodding through there and you're like super anxious and stuff. Like VR is much more of a visceral experience, just inherently. So I feel like what they did is they played there's a horror section in Half-Life 2. There you go to this town called Ravenholm, I think is the name of it. And it's like a horror section in that game, meaning it's like this kind of abandoned town and there are these head crabs that come at you and it's kind of like it's considered the sort of like horror aspect of the game. They do a lot of that in Half-Life Alex, and it's like way it's intense. It's kind of taxing. And me personally, I don't like. I mean, I've worked, I've worked on Dead Space.
Here comes
Uh,
Mr. Dead
I
Space
I
talking about
don't.
how he doesn't like horror games.
Yeah, I don't like
John
playing horror
Dead Space
games.
Hackett, as he's known.
I don't play horror games.
I don't
I
either, dude.
I'm fine with horror movies, I think. Although I prefer, we've talked before, I prefer more like the 80s monster movies. I prefer like monster based kind of like horror
You
movies
look like the
and
kind of guy that
creature
would
stuff.
prefer 80s horror movies.
It's because I'm old. Um, but what was I saying? Anyway, I never
That's my
finished
fault.
Half-Life Alex because it's got certain sequences in it where they're very, very stressful and very like jump scary kind of stuff, and I just got to a point where it's just like I can't take this damn game anymore. Like it's
So
too much.
you're a weak little baby man that
Yes,
can't handle pixels.
yes, it's funny.
I understand.
A lot of my game dev friends are the same way. Where we're just like, I don't want to play horror VR. Nope.
I
Uh,
haven't tried horror VR. I don't think I would do well. So I remember when Doom 3 came out, I was a gigantic Doom and Doom 2 fan. Just feed it to me with a spoon. I was like, Doom 3, let's do this. And I remember I lived in Carterville at the time, back where we grew up in Southern Illinois, and renting a house. And I believe I was living already at that time with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. Turned off all the lights. I think she was working or something. I was alone. I put on headphones, studio closed headphones, and I was like, let's do this. And about 3 minutes, like I did not make it long because that is not the experience I was expecting. Right. That is a scary game with the flashlight business and the jump scare. And like,
yeah,
I don't know. I think the industry's expectation for Doom and what Doom currently is these days is very different than the Doom that I grew up with. Because the Doom that I grew up with, that I remember and that I see when I go and play the game now, but maybe I'm wrong, is like a fun, wacky, kind of like more like rock and roll, like heavy metal, like yeah, it's a demon and whatever. And it's like bright and colorful and doesn't take itself too seriously. There's no EDM in classic Doom, and I know EDM didn't exist probably or something, but like it was such a different feeling. Like I get more He-Man from Doom and Doom 2. You know what I mean? Just like here's
Yeah.
a sword, or it doesn't matter. It's a chainsaw and a double barrel shotgun, and like the
Yeah.
newer games are just well, more modernized, but it's a whole different. To me, it's a whole different tone. It's more like yeah, awesome, and I don't know. I have a hard time putting words to it, I guess, but the tone changed drastically to me between which how could it not almost over 2 decades? But what was it? It was like 1996 or something to 2006
Wait, so
Doom
this was
3
Doom
or
3?
Doom 2016.
You're talking about Doom
No,
3
sorry,
that was you found to
I
be
kind of jumped
horrific?
from Doom 3 to modern Doom. Doom 3 was also had a very different feeling though, right? Like they went from the Doom 2, which was like big guns and very colorful and stuff, to like dark and scary and brooding.
Yeah.
From my experience, Doom 3, oh here we go. This is the first Aliens reference of our chat. Doom 3 reminds me of Alien 3, where it kind of took everything down a notch and kind of darker and scarier and more isolated, and not in a direction I really wanted to go. You know,
Yeah.
Aliens 2 was more like machine guns and yeah, lots of aliens, and
Yeah.
Doom 3 was more closeted,
What's funny though is that
slow,
Alien
somber.
1 is very much a horror movie and only a horror movie. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
have action stuff in it. Um yeah, it's interesting. Doom 1 and Doom 2 were yeah, He-Man's a good analogy. They were very it was very much just like
It's like fun.
yeah, and the music was all that MIDI versions of like like what was it like Slayer songs or whatever songs that is that they're kind of it's got all those guitar riffs and stuff in it, and
Yes.
it was like heavy metal converted to MIDI, and it's a heavy metal like and there's yeah I guess they take the lights down sometimes, but you're not looking for jump scares. You're running around like at freaking 50 miles an hour in that game, just blowing shit up left and right. And it's I feel like Doom has finally come back around to that. The last two Doom games were very much just like they've got the heavy metal back, and I haven't played fully through either of them, but I don't think that they do like slow plotting horror jump scare kind of sequences anymore. I think it's
Not
more
as
just
much,
about
no.
like I'm just running around 100 miles an hour and kicking demons in the face and stuff. But yeah, I think Doom 3 is the one where they like slowed it way down and made it much more about like, oh shit, I'm in the darkness, and not that you were powerless, but
Manage
it
your light
was.
as a resource. Doom
Mm-hmm.
2, light was never used as a resource. It was used as like a mood setter or a challenge increaser. Like, oh, it's flashing, it's harder, or like this room's just straight up dark. You better deal with those pinkies, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
way different tone. Yeah, so
Um,
I skip over Doom 3 in my mind. I go straight to Doom 2016, which a lot of people liked. I didn't care for it that much. I remember this moment when I was playing 2016 Doom where I walked into a room and the monsters were all like running around, and I'm sitting there just kind of waiting for like, how am I gonna? And there was like like for a little bit of a vertical structure, and like I was in like a cliff area with some rocks and stuff, but the monsters just kept running around, and I just sat there for a while, and I'm like, they weren't coming for me. You know what I mean?
mm,
Um, they were clearly trying to pull me into the level, and I was like, no. So I just like nuked them from, and I'm like, okay. It was a little weird. Also the thing where you go in there and you like smash monsters in the face,
yeah.
um, very satisfying. But I couldn't get past the feeling that it felt a little too catering, a little too handholdy, just to me personally, right? I'm not saying it's a bad mechanic or anything. I'm just saying to me it felt like you know somebody deep frying something just because they know it tastes good, even though it's not like nutritional in this context. I'm a
It's
snobby. I
interesting.
always use food analogies.
I mean, they looped it into the mechanics for the game where you had to do that when you would do those fatalities. I think it produced ammo and armor shards, and so it was like
They definitely
if you
incentivized it
didn't
well.
do it, you would run low on resources. So they like, but you're right that it was just kind of a click, and then it was just I mean, it's a canned animation. You're triggering a second or two long canned
Yeah,
animation.
I don't.
So it was
Anything
like
that
cool
takes
the
away the
first
action.
time, but then after a while you're like, all right, I've seen this. Like how many hundreds of times am I going to watch the same kind of Kong versus the T-Rex thing where he rips his jaw open, or like, all right, like,
That's good
um,
for a big moment. That can be a good boss killer or something. But like, if it's every other enemy, I'm just like, even a chest mechanic. If it's like, cool, man, there's 1,000 chests here. You know, bing, bing. You can make it as sparkly and polished and fancy as you want. But I don't. Yeah, a little too monotonous, right?
yeah. But they introduced something similar at some point in Destiny 2, I think is when they introduced that you could do these finishers. Like when you get an enemy down to a certain level, they get a little pip over their head, and then you can
Finish
click,
him.
and you'll rush in and you do a little canned animation. And it's like it doesn't you can enable perks that that give that a gameplay benefit, but the for the most part the benefit is just that you don't have to shoot them down for that last 25% of their health or whatever. It's just a quick finish. And they do also, like, you're pretty much invincible. Like, it can suck you into the middle of a big mob of guys, and it can screw you over if you do it, I guess, in the wrong situation where you're just getting completely swarmed. But they have a bunch of perks where, like, a perk where, like, okay, when you do that finisher, it creates a little explosion around you, and like, so it takes care of that, or where it starts your health regen or something like that. And it does it feels cool. I like using it, but it is one of those things too where you're like, I'm not really doing anything other than just clicking the stick. It feels a little
Yeah.
bit like, click here to trigger this canned animation, and um I don't know.
So, you remind me. I think last time we talked, I'm just going to talk about Vlambeer a lot because I'm a fan, and you did not know. I'm just going to be constantly picking at your brain to see what indie things have crossed your radar.
That's fine. That's fine. Because we're gonna go back to Half Life too.
Yeah, no,
So
and we
go ahead.
should. So Vlambeer, you had not heard of, right?
No.
Had you heard of Nuclear Throne game?
No.
Okay, so Nuclear Throne to me is one of my favorite Vlambeer games. Anyway, action game, right? So action roguelike, very arcade style, very like similar gameplay to Doom, right? Few resources, few weapons. I think in Nuclear Throne, you're just switching between two different weapons that you can choose to equip as they drop, and then each character has one special ability. So we're talking about very simple gameplay, like along the lines of Doom, right? Monster behaviors can be pretty complicated, but they have a lot of great talks about how they made the game so well. And one of them was talking about how you don't want to take people out of the gameplay when it's an action game specifically, right? Like if it's a tactics game, Into the Breach, it might take me 20 minutes to make a move, and I'm having a blast the whole time doing it, right? But in the middle of a game of Nuclear Throne, the last thing I want to do is break up the action and pause and go like, all right, which of my four weapons? No, I'm dodging bullets, man. I'm rolling, I'm swapping between my melee and slicing somebody down, and then swapping my shotgun and making a fire and rolling away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to care about ammo. Like ammo is an important part of the game design, but I don't want to think about it in that moment. You know what I mean? I want it to be more like my legs are just walking. I'm not thinking about how my knees are bending or anything. I want to, you want that flow state, right? You want to be
Yeah.
immersed in the experience. Um, I don't know where I was going with that, but what were we talking about before that? Oh, we need the anime. I'll make an animation, the train boss. I thought there
Right.
was something we were talking about though, where
Well, I was
something
talking about
was
how
taking.
clicking the stick, and you basically are taking control away from the player for a second or two, and it's
Yeah,
like, we're just
the
gonna
whole.
automatically do something cool for you here.
Yeah, I don't want any cutscenes. I don't want ever. Like that's one. Okay, I'm gonna hear it as Splunky. Ring. The first time we're talking about Splunky of the talk.
Mm-hmm.
Splunky time. Anyway, one of my favorite things about Splunky is it's just pure gameplay, the purest gameplay. If you're in a level, there's no taking away. The only thing that takes your gameplay away for a minute is you get stunned, and that's when you messed up. That's punishment, right? Everything else is just you're jumping, you're making decisions, you're throwing, you're dropping, you're flipping, you're planning your route. Go. There's never a minute where you're like, let me open up this menu, blah blah blah, or like here's this animation that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
The thing in Doom 2016, whatever that mechanic was called, it reminded me of a game I actually liked a lot, Alien versus Predator. which had this really interesting kind of class-based approach, right? Almost like a rock paper scissors situation, sort of, where you could play as a soldier, like a human, you could play as an alien, like a xenomorph, or you could play as a predator, whatever they're called. I'm just going to call that a predator.
Yeah.
But they all felt very different, right? But the xenomorphs and the predators both had these kind of long, drawn out kill animations, which were super fun the first few times, and then eventually it got really ridiculous. And the game was known for having these big stacks where you'd come up behind a human and you do the death animation, and it would take a few seconds, and then someone would walk up behind you and do the same thing, and no one could do anything about it. But you'd get this like like a what's the word, a conga line going, right, and you got like just death, this death machine, caterpillar of death, and it just felt like dumb, weird,
Yeah.
and yeah, you don't want to wait. You want like, give me that instant gratification, and then I'm on to the next interesting decision I got to make.
It's funny. The note that I just wrote down is like, where's the line? Because and what you just described is something that sometimes happens in Battlefield. When you're playing Battlefield, if you get the jump on somebody and you do the melee attack, you can perform this canned animation where you kind of whip them around and you whoosh with the knife, and then you get their dog tag, and it's like, so you get a melee kill and you get the dog tag, but they can be interrupted. So you can walk over and the animation can start. I've seen sequences before where somebody comes over, the animation starts, it gets interrupted. Suddenly their view is they're getting an animation done on them, and then that person gets interrupted, and and like just what you described, where it's like this sequence of like, and like the animations don't actually complete. So it's like it's interesting when you definitely got to think about single player versus multiplayer when you try to come up with those kind of mechanics, because like and also where's the line in terms of at what point are you taking control away from the player and kind of
At every
hand
point.
holding them versus, well, true, but like, so for example, and also how immediate is it? Like, to bring up Dead Space again, Dead Space had a stomp thing where like if an enemy is like, if they're like on the, when you shoot an enemy's legs off and they go and then they fall on the ground, they start crawling toward you and they get close, you can do like a and like you melee stomp them, but or but you can also do that to corpses too. You can just kind of come over and but it's like, I don't know, that isn't that just where's the line, right? Because all games have like a, you can like, Quake and Doom and everything had like a quick hit melee thing. It's like, well, that's, are you taking the control away there? And like what?
Well,
So are we just talking about it's like a 0.2 second versus a 0.8 second animation, and like,
yeah,
where's the
we
threshold?
we have talked about how um different games, like the timing matters a lot. What's interesting about, here it comes again, the Spelunky, is there's no pausing when you use the whip. You know how in Castlevania, when you whip, it has this exaggerated and then bam, and the whole time you're not moving.
Yeah.
Castlevania is a game that very much makes you, like, it commits you. Like when you jump, there's no shenanigans. This is reality, baby. Like if you're heading to that pit or you're getting that Medusa head in your face,
There's no oil.
um, right. Yeah. um, so Spelunky being is a really interesting use case because I think it was partially inspired by games like Castlevania with the whip and whatnot, right? And I think by default, most game developers would come at a whip with what I would describe as the baggage of the delay. So you would, in your head, you'd think, oh, it's a whip. And in your mind, okay, so in reality, I'm going to stop and I'm going to stand here and I'm going to swing this thing behind me and then I'm going to let it rip. And each part of that in your head, I think your average designer would approach that with your stationary. You have a movement, essentially a movement penalty, right? And I think that would get baked into the mechanic as you design it, bringing it from the real world into the game. And then also influenced by other games such as Castlevania that do have that essentially waiting mechanic, right? But with Spelunky, you can move the whole time. There's even parts in the game, no spoiler, but there's a mini boss, or boss really, where you can use the whip, and the whole time you want to be moving, and it's pretty important because I've died in this boss a lot. But there's a part where you're whip, 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 and the whole time you're dodging stuff falling down at you, right? Why not let you move? In fact, like most of the time I'm whipping, I am moving a lot. I am like I'm almost always moving when I play Spelunky. I'm like whippity whip whip whip. The whip is such a spectacular tool. It's like this magic noodle, and it never slows you down. It is a joy, right? Because there's no friction. It never stops you. It just lets you have a whipping good time. That's oh, you're muted. That's my first
Whoops.
Spelunky
Good one, I
rant.
said.
I've mentioned it a few times, but there might be another Spelunky rant coming.
I'm sure there will be. It'll come back up. Well, so like if we're talking about single player versus multiplayer, I know that when I was playing in college, when I would go to the arcade and play Street Fighter a lot, um, throws were considered like cheap. Because
Yeah.
you know, SIU had a big. I had a bunch of Japanese friends because SIU had the sister campus thing in Japan, and so there was a big influx of and you know I took Japanese there and stuff, and so meet up with these guys at the arcade, play a bunch of Street Fighter and stuff, and so that's where I picked up that like from them it's like it's cheap, you don't throw, and like and if you cheat if you throw, like it's usually by accident, you'd actually apologize to the person that you're playing with. And I never really understood why, I guess, but I guess just because it's an easy thing to do, and but part of it might also be because you're taking control away from the other player, and actually it's a little bit like in Destiny 2, clicking the stick to finish off an enemy is kind of like it would be the same thing where you're like, it's a little cheap. Like, come on, you couldn't finish me off the real way. Like you're doing this, like, because
I remember that.
throws would take off a decent chunk. So if you're getting close with with whoever, and you kind of suddenly you're doing a suplex with Guile or something, you could take a giant chunk off, and you'd be like, God damn it! Like,
I think it was also an element of you were both aware. Like if you're there playing Street Fighter and you care that much, you're probably a kid where a quarter is like not nothing to you. That's the way we were, right? Like a quarter, like okay, we can get a quarter. Mom might give us some quarters or something, right? Like we weren't going to starve or whatever. But it was like we can't play all day. Like I can't even play. I can't play 4 games today. I have 75 cents.
yeah,
And at that point, the throwing is a way of like you take your agency away, and that's boring. You take a big hit, the health, and it's like we both are paying to play, and by throwing me, we both get to play less now.
yeah.
That's not fun. But if you should have a rule, right? We're just gonna jab each other. We want to play as long as possible while our mom's shopping or something. So we're just gonna like
Yeah.
only light kicks and light punches. Slowest fireballs.
Right. Only throw jab fireballs.
Everything does just one vertical pixel of damage. Everyone behind you in line is like,
these two guys, come on.
just throw it for one fierce.
Yeah, taking away, removing player agency is not something you ever really want to do. You definitely don't want to do it in a multiplayer thing, but it's I think what we were talking about is how we started this was even removing it from the player in a single player context is you run the risk of making the player tired of that mechanic. And like it in Doom, there's so many different animations that you can do. Like it's not like they have 2 animations and you're just like, oh God, after 10 minutes, you're just like, enough. Like they've got a whole suite of animations. So that's how they keep it interesting. But yeah, if you play that game 50 hours, you've seen all the animations and it's you got to ride that line, or like, okay, are we just irritating players? Are we boring players? Like, how do we keep this fresh? Or how do we, it is incentivized, but you're like, you got to balance. Okay, well, players feel that they have to do this. Do they feel like does it become a chore? Does it become like, all right, I'm obliged to do this because the mechanics are going to punish me if I don't, it's weird.
Yeah.
There's no silver bullet answer for any of that. Let's go back to Half-Life, because the whole reason that I brought Spelunky? Up the whole reason that Half-Life was brought up was because I was going to mention the end. And why were we talking about doing? Oh, because we were talking about
Oh, you're gonna
Battlestar.
spoil it for me and anyone who
I'm not.
watches. John, come on. Kidding, I'm
Well, I
kidding.
mean, Jesus, you've only had 20 plus years to play Half-Life 2 or however
It's
long
reached the,
Half-Life
what is
2's been.
that? The statute of limitations is
Yeah,
expired.
yeah.
You're in the safe zone,
But I
John.
won't
Right?
spoil it for you because I think you should. I mean, it's
Look, you know the truth. The truth is the only way I will play at this point, 20 odd years or later or whatever, is if you hold my hand during a stream here and make me play it. That's
yeah.
one of the things I think that streams could actually be really good for. Is like I want to sit you down, like you. If it hasn't been clear, I want you to play Spelunky and other games as
I know.
well.
We've played it
You
once
could get me to
before.
play Half-Life 2. It'd be fun too. We could go through like I'm sure I don't know if you maybe played a little bit, but I doubt you've beaten the Wizard's Lizard. And like we could go
I've
through
not.
and play some of your games,
Oh boy.
Godfather games.
Oh God. Let's see.
Yeah.
How long would it take? Half-Life 2, according to the Googles, is about 13 hours in length to finish
Well,
Half-Life
that's
2.
only 4 or 5 streams.
Yeah, easy.
No problem.
Right. So I don't know if you I don't know. Anyway, it's a classic game is
Yeah,
the thing
yeah,
too. So
yeah.
it's one of those that's
I respect it.
it's almost like telling somebody you've never seen Star Wars. You know, like people
I
be
get it.
like,
And I
"What?"
gotta say, people who haven't at this point, I'm like, do it. Stay there, right? Like I had a friend who hadn't had chicken nuggets. I think he hit like 35 or something, and I was like, go to the grave, my friend.
What?
Like if there's something like that that pops up for me, right? Like yeah, I'm just gonna own it.
Okay.
Like you've never had grapes? Like yeah, and I refuse. I'm 40. I will never have grapes. I'm all in, baby. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I mean, because I could spoil it for you.
Just do it. I'm just
Okay.
breaking the balls. It's
All
a
right.
part of my brotherly duties.
So I think what we were talking about is the we started talking about how things that don't stick to landing, and we were referencing movies and shows. Um, there are there's a an approach in video games, I believe, and this is my perception, where you kind of leave. We've talked before about like don't make the beginning first. Like you start somewhere in the middle of the game and you make that, and then that's sort of your vertical slice, and then you make the beginning last, so that you have all of the knowledge of making the game, and so that you can factor in stuff about tutorial and all that stuff. I'm going to make myself a side note about the tutorials. Think that I want to talk about later too. Um, what was I saying? Oh, because you want to factor in the tutorials, and then the ending usually gets deprioritized, like just in general. And a lot of games do this where the end is kind of like like all right,
Oh
whatever.
yeah.
Like big whoop, I finished it. You can tell that maybe the last level feels a little rushed or something, and you're like, ending was kind of lame, and like the middle was fun, but like by the end you're like, all right, enough of this game, and it kind of ends with just like went, and there you go, want roll credits, and you're like, cool, I played it, I beat it. Um, but the thing is that comes from data, and that data actually comes from Valve themselves released some information about like because they're um, I think this was about Half-Life 1 where they were able to use Steam to track kind of like what percentage of players who buy a game play a game all the way through. What percentage of players reach the end versus play the first level versus how, at what level at what point do they drop off and stuff. When we started to
Yeah.
get to the point where we were able to get analytics about games, it was very interesting because, and I think you can see this with a lot of games where the trail off is amazing. Like first of all, the number of people who play the first level of a game is not 100%. Like you will get people that just buy a game like never, they either fire it up and don't complete the first level, or they like never fired up to begin with, or whatever. It's like it's weird. It's like 80-85% or something people who buy a game will beat the first level, and you're like, what are these other 15% of people doing? It's weird. And the data that they showed, I should look. I'm kind of speaking, talking out of my ass here, but as I recall, the data showed that the people who beat like Half-Life One, it was like 1% of the people who played Half-Life One like beat the last level or something. So like so few people actually, but you know, it was low in that specific case, but you see this trend across games, like the number of people who are going to who will play a game versus the number of people who complete a game. You look at that data and you go, well, then from a production standpoint, we're going to deprioritize the last level. Like basically your priority, basically in terms of where you focus your production and your all your resources, mirrors that natural fall off of how many players are going to experience this. That you know you do need to make your first level really important because it's got to grab people, and the middle's got to be really good if you want to see people see people, you want people to see it through. Um, yeah, and so but the problem there is that what you can run into is the stuff that we're talking about with Battlestar Galactica or AI or Game of Thrones or something where like if you don't have the ending in mind, if you don't it's different because those are story based mediums, whereas a lot of games all games are story based mediums, but a lot of people don't or a lot of games don't prioritize it as much. But the you know the ending of something, whatever the medium is, the ending of something being kind of like ugh, or being off or not really being satisfying can taint the entire experience that came before it. And um, yeah, why did I want to go back to that? Why did I want to bring that up? I just Half Life. Um, Half Life One, in my opinion, this is purely my opinion. Half Life One, the last level was bad. It kind of sucked. You go through a portal, you end up on like in the aliens' homeworld. It to me, it was clear that the art was kind of rushed. The gameplay was meh, and it was like you know it's kind of all right, okay, and it just didn't feel as good. Half Life Two, the ending of that game is freaking awesome
Mhm.
because they like did the exact opposite where you have this power the whole way through the game. You get this gravity gun, which is you know so many games have done a gravity gun since obviously, but the Half Life Two you could you know pick boxes up and throw them and stuff. It was a physics gun. When you get to the end of that game, something happens in the story. I don't remember exactly what, but you get somehow enhanced, and your gravity gun gets like 10x stronger. And suddenly you can rip shit off of the walls and throw it, and you can directly grab enemies and throw enemies around. Whereas before, all you could do would like you could use it to pick up like saw blades and throw it at zombies, and it would
Mm.
slice them. And it was like it was satisfying up until that point. But the last level of the game, they take it and they they
Yeah.
take it to the
Keep it
max and it
up.
feels awesome. And so you end the
Yeah.
game on high, right? Where you end the game going like that was freaking sick. Right? So like for the last hour of that game, I was like Superman. I was just running around, just you know,
Yeah, man.
ripping things apart and yeeting dudes off of buildings and like it was sweet. Um
I think
so
that's sweet when games do that. I think the only complaint that sometimes pops up is that the game doesn't give you enough time to enjoy that sweet, sweet reward that it
yeah.
gives you. Right, you got to find a playground that's big enough to satisfy the player. Something that comes to my mind is a really old one, Kid Icarus for NES, which probably came out in like mid '80s.
Yeah.
Because that one, for the most part, it is a side-scrolling platformer game, and it even has some, labyrinth style levels, kind of roguelike.
Mhm.
Not really. Anyway, um, the spoiler, but it's ancient. The last level, it's more of a side-scrolling shooter where you can fly. You have this really badass shield. You have this really powerful projectile, whereas most of the game you have a little pew pew, tiny little itty bitty thin little arrow.
Little Cupid bow and arrow.
Yeah, and so you kind of get that power fantasy fulfilled finally in the last level. But the last level is this itty bitty isolated experience where you just kind of go through like a one R type level or something, and the boss you just shoot him in the face a lot,
Mhm.
and that's it.
Mhm.
So it's a little unsatisfying in that regard, but
Yeah.
I definitely like ramping stuff up near the end. Is this something you think about in your game designs? Is the human interest curve? So I'm going to graph out. This is one of those cases where I wish I had set up my. I guess I could try on my tablet. But so you have your here. You just have a little box, right?
Yeah.
And so over time, you want your experience. Yeah, it's pretty rough. But anyway, it goes something like this over time, right?
Yeah.
So what for experience wise, you want to start off pretty strong in Act One, right? And then you come way down, chill things out, and this should actually be a little bit higher, like maybe like here. But then you ramp things up, and it's not until the very end when you get and maybe even exceed where you started at the beginning. You probably will exceed, but you want to start almost as strong as you end to really get people hooked. Because as you were saying, some people will never get past your first level. Something Jeff and I talk about a lot is Shining Force, which I remember that you played.
Yeah.
But the very first tactics level in Shining Force is very polished. It has an earthquake scene where the whole map shakes and there's like dialogue and your character's like, whoa. And then the whole environment that you're playing in changes with this big crack and it changes the map you have to go to next. And it's this big moment. And yeah, they never do that again. Right. That was all stuff
Yeah.
they had just in the beginning to kind of make it like that big, fire off the adventure, even though it's probably like 20, 30 minutes, depending on how you're playing. But it's not immediate, but it is like the first time you're fighting, you get to experience like a huge earthquake, which is a big deal.
Mm.
And it kind of like you get that that long tail effect where you feel like, whoa, that was cool. There's even this cart cinematic where you've got this cart like takes you across the land and all that stuff. It makes the journey that puts you on feel more epic, right? Because it had this
Yeah.
big setup.
You ride that high for a little bit, even if every level doesn't have an earthquake in it, you're remembering
You're still
that.
riding that earthquake high, at least the first three chapters of that game.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. So it's interesting because how do you balance what you plan from the beginning? You gotta if you don't stick that landing, you run a risk of really leaving people with kind of not a bad taste in their mouth, but more just kind of apathy. You know, like and that's worse. Like to have an ending, and like I never finished. I played and loved the first two Mass Effect games. They're great. In fact, I started a replay through when the Legendary Edition came out. Um, I didn't get out of the Citadel though, because I played every damn side quest I could get my hands on. And I like burned myself out before I even got out of the Citadel. But I never beat Mass Effect 3. And I think Mass Effect 3 had a controversial ending for some reason. Like when it came out, people found it very unsatisfying or whatever. I think the ending, but the impression I got from people who would complain about it was that it wasn't satisfying enough, or it didn't have enough emotional payoff. Considering that you have played three at that point, you have played three games with these characters, and it didn't
Mm.
pay off well enough and stuff. So I'm sure the concerns were legitimate, but like people cared. It wasn't just an ending that was like meh. That's probably not a great example because like I said, it is three games in a row, and you're getting a lot of investment there. But like anyway, you have endings to stuff where people were like where they actually can like make people mad. Like it's better to be
Mm-hmm.
like to it's almost better to be upset by the ending of a game, show, movie, whatever, than it is to just kind of be like, meh, okay, well, that was dumb. That didn't do anything for me.
Mm.
Like for me, um, I don't know, like Battlestar.
Here we are back to Battlestar.
We are back to Battlestar. I haven't ever gone back. Like I've rewatched lots of shows. I've rewatched Game of Thrones several times. Uh, I don't think though that I rewatched have rewatched Game of Thrones since like I think when season 7, I think I probably rewatched it again building up to season 7. They did 8 seasons, right? 7 and 8 were both like little mini seasons essentially.
Yeah.
I think after season 7 I was like, okay. And then I didn't rewatch it again and 8 came out and I was like, all right. Okay, and I haven't
I don't think 8 is a watch it on repeat kind of season. 7, weaker than others, but it did have some good. Is that the episode that had the there's so many spoilers, and this is a relatively new thing, but the Cersei, you know what I'm talking about, the Cersei episode, the one that
With the
begins with the
church.
piano. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, is that
That's
in 7 or is that in
it's
6?
either 6 or 7. I'm sure of it. Anyway,
Yeah,
that's the good stuff. So like there's good stuff in there, but
there is. There is. It really.
I might watch it again and stop at 7 to be honest, maybe after 7 to be
Yeah,
honest.
I mean, there was still satisfying stuff in 7 and 8. It just felt like they got to 6, and then in 7 and 8 they were like, it felt like the creators were like, okay, we're kind of bored of this and we just want to wrap it up, and so like time and space stopped mattering. They stopped having any impact whatsoever on the storytelling. You could travel from like the southern part of the continent to the wall in like a night on if you had a dragon, or you could send a crow there and get a crow there like immediately. Versus when you watch the first season, the king comes and gets Ned and wants to take him back to the main kingdom. They're on the road for like a month, right? There's all these scenes between the king and Ned where they're talking and having these interactions and stuff, and it's all along the journey. Like they make it a point to talk about how long it takes to get from place to place. And then by the end of the show, they're just like, screw all that. Who cares?
Can you see that? Does that work?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty good, right?
Yeah. Now I did feel that like I thought season 6. I do know that I feel that season 6 was really satisfying. Season 5
Mm.
was a little slow, and I think it was also had a lot of like really kind of terrible, misogynistic kind of like, a lot of terrible things happen
Oh,
to
geez, you're
characters
not
and
watching the
stuff,
right
and
show if you want to that kind of content.
yeah, but 5 to me was
Game
worth
my
it.
my young children really don't like Game of Thrones. I'm mad at HBO.
Yeah, exactly.
They keep crying when I put them to bed.
But 5 was worth it because it set up 6, and 6 had a lot of really satisfying stuff happen in it, and there are things that only could have happened because of how awful some of the stuff that happened in 5 was. Yeah,
He's
yeah,
a good villain.
yeah, and also I think it was at the end of 6 where by the end of 6 you see all of the female characters have all taken positions of power, and you kind of had
Mhm.
that feeling of like seeing how all the chess pieces had kind of finally slotted into place, and you're like, oh, I see, pretty clever, okay, that's cool, this she's there and she's there and she's there, and like, okay, cool, the stage
Yes.
is set kind of thing. It had a good kind of payoff. um
I'm always for women in positions of power in every context.
yeah, absolutely.
Name one, and and I'm for it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So that was cool. It took a lot of horribleness to get us there, but it was whatever. Um, what are we talking about? Why are
I don't
we?
know. I think we're searching for game dev lessons while having an excuse to talk about our favorite TV shows.
Yeah, probably. But I think it does. It's hard. This particular topic is hard because, like I said, with that data backing up how you get that drop off before you get to the end of a game, typically it's very hard to, from a production standpoint, say, listen, we need to really, really, really work on the ending of this game. We're making a 20-hour game. We're making a 30-hour game. We got to make sure that the ending is bloody amazing, blah, blah, blah. You're not going to get any complaints from people that, like, yeah, you're not going to get anybody arguing for, well, we want to make an ending that sucks, or we don't want to put any resources in the ending. Like, nobody's going to actually actively push for making the ending less, but it's just not going to, you're going to have a harder time getting it more prioritized than, say, than the first level or the second or third
Well,
level. It's just,
it's not very good business wise. It's not to focus on the ending, right? Like
yeah.
if you get everything down to where it's good enough and you are then talking about polish and optimization and improvement and stuff, it would be really difficult to think about investing in almost anything except the beginning parts, right? Because as you were saying, you have this kind of funnel, this tight drop off, right? The people who will play the game, every single step that I'm going to talk about here is going to have drop off of some kind. People find out about your game. People
Mm-hmm.
view the game on the store. People wishlist it. People buy it. People install it. people open it. Some people will open it and close it immediately and never do that again. Some people will just futz with the title screen and change some settings. Some people will open level 1 and then like their spouse comes home and they hit pause and they're gone forever. Never get back to it. You know what I mean? Some people beat level 1, some people beat level 2, yada yada yada. All the way to the end. Like at the very end, 1 out of 1,000 people actually get to the end who played the game, right? And 1 out of 10,000 people are actually like, yeah, I got all the achievements. Right. And every step of the way you lose, it's like it's actually a little bit like wait, is it Battlestar Galactica? No, I'm getting my robot attacking humanity stories mixed up. It's the Butlerian Jihad in Dune has a similar situation as Battlestar Galactica, where humanity's fighting for its like self, right? And anyway, in that story, there's this case where humanity has this really big armada. They're just like they're going after the robots with everything they got. Spoilers, but it's old stuff. And their technology they use to get to the different robot planets to nuke them, right off the top, 10% of the ships that they use to teleport this armada get teleported in the wrong place and end up either the other side of the galaxy or in the middle of a sun or something. So every time that they go somewhere else, they're losing 10% of their force. But they did the numbers and they had enough to where, they could just send wave after wave of men
at your disposal
to go and die.
Right,
yeah.
men? You suck.
You suck. Yeah. So it was the Futurama thing, but it was in the Dune universe. And so I think about that with a game, right? Also a lot of marketing stuff. I've been looking into marketing stuff a lot, and then you got it's a similar concept. You have a concept of a sales funnel. At the top of your funnel is awareness. Like anyone who's heard of Valadria, like, oh, I've heard of that. What is that? Right. And then there might be like, oh, that's the new Lost Decade thing. Yeah. Didn't they stop doing a thing and now there's a new thing, right? And then they might get to desire, like, oh, hey, and that Valadria thingy, that guy wrote a book, huh? And then I see, I don't even know this stuff. Look, I have it over here. Action. Then they might take an action, like, oh, okay, Matt put his book on sale, or I listened to Matt's podcast and he wore me down and I finally went and bought it, or whatever it is, right? So you have a sales funnel, and that's true for your games. It's true for your games. It's true for my games. Everybody's games. First, you have to be aware of it before you can want it, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. What else did we talk about recently? There was something that came up.
Do you have a document?
I do have a document. I'm looking at it, and
open up the G doc.
This is actually it's interesting that this came up about the building the beginning, middle, and end, because that was something that I think we talked about like on one of our first streams. So this is, I guess this is a decent branch off, because this is something that I wrote down that I want to talk about as well. What?
Look at this. Look at that. You like that?
I do like that.
That's from my book.
From your book, you say?
Oh, you mean this thing right here? You can get for $14.99. Anyway.
So this is something that you brought up that I think is super interesting, and something that some games have dealt with recently. Is the concept of how when we were kids, games, the notion of a tutorial level was not a thing. There was no such thing as a tutorial level. There was the first level.
You had a manual.
Which, yeah, you had a manual. You had a manual that would there was a first level in that, like Super Mario Brothers, like it had the first, it kind of showed you, we've talked about that. There's been examinations of the first couple screens of Super Mario in terms of like, oh, here's this one, and then there's the repeat box, and like, you got to jump on the Goomba. Like, it's kind of like, see, okay, now you have to build, but like, it didn't sit there and go, press A to jump. Make sure you hit this box as many times as you can,
Mega Man.
Only hit the Goombas from the top, but don't bump into the side, blah, blah, blah. It didn't like write it all out. They just set up a nice scenario for you to figure it out yourself. Zelda didn't start with, press this button to swing your sword, like it's, they would naturally dole things out to you in a way that made sense, but they didn't have a whole they didn't have a perfectly sculpted level that was sitting there holding your hand and telling you like precisely what to do. It was more like they would
Mhm.
set you up for success with the level design, but there was a certain amount of like, well, you got to figure this out on your own, and surely you read the damn manual, right? Like, what do you mean you don't know what button to press? There's only X number of buttons on the damn controller to begin with, and
What do you mean the manual is 30 years old and disintegrated in your hands? What?
yeah, yeah,
What are you
but
talking about, kid?
it's interesting. Like, it would be really interesting to, and I think you had talked about the notion of making a game that doesn't do any of that stuff and then releasing some kind of like an ebook or something to go with the game that's like a
Yeah.
mandatory part of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think mandatory is impossible in the age of the internet. The thing is like I like the idea of having a manual now where you need to refer to the manual and you could make a game designed around that. That sounds kind of fun. But mandatory, come on, like you can go to what is that? There's a million wiki sites. What's
Yeah.
the main one? Wiki, people can go find information if they want it. There's gonna be a YouTube video that walks you through all the hey, I found the secrets from the book or whatever. But that does sound like a fun way to design a game. That sounds for me like something I've already got a pipeline. I've already made a book, and so that's part of my workshop. And it gives you a hook, which is something I don't have. I don't have that many hooks
Mm.
for most of the projects I'm working on. There's like two or three interesting things I could dig out of them to tell people about that they'll go like they're very nichey, right? Some people will be like, "Oh, I really like witchcraft. That's cool. I'll be into your next game." Or I really like indie games with you know low resolution art styles. Like, sure, I'll be into your games. But some kind of a really cool book to go along with it is a pretty good hook. Even rhymes with book. A book hook
The book hook.
that could really help out.
I think you'd have to, yeah, I mean, like making it, I think what you can't force people to do nowadays is to go outside the game. Um, I don't think you can, I don't think you can force people to do that. It's just like if they play the game and there's literally nothing inside the actual software itself, you're gonna get people who bail. You can't be like, oh, here's a URL to go
Nah,
to or something. That's gonna people are gonna be like, what? Like, okay, suddenly this is on me. You're gonna make me do all this work. Ugh, screw this game.
yeah,
Um, that being said, you get a lot of games that that naturally get their own where like you get games like Elden Ring or Monster Hunter or things like that where like there's all that like even most MMOs you're gonna go to websites. Like it's not like that people don't go to websites. It's just that they're not mandatory. If you were to make a game where it was literally mandatory, where like the first like if you just go pick the game up and choose start and it doesn't even tell you what any of the buttons do or any like it tells you nothing, that might be a turnoff at this point. So, but if you took that ebook and folded it into the game itself, that could be interesting. Try to find some way to fold the. I mean, you could go so far as to take the manual and fold the manual and the presence of the manual into the fiction or into the part of into
oh,
part
that's
of
cool.
the
Yeah,
like you have to read a book and then you play that part of the game or something like that. Um, the lowest lift version would be like there's start and then there's like manual is the next thing down, and it's like and you would just have to make it known that like if you press start there's no tutorial
yeah,
stuff. We basically just throw you into it because we're assuming you read the manual. But if you made it so that when they press start they went to the manual and that like you folded that into
yeah,
the part of the whole experience, that could be a way to do it. I don't know.
yeah. People on Twitter were talking about how it could be a setting. So by default, probably it's a modern game, right? And you go to the first level, and it's like here's a little pop up that tells you how to do something or whatever. You do things the modern way. You use level design to guide players, but you do have educational stuff in the game, right? But there could be a setting and maybe even a splash interstitial where it's like, hey, getting ready to play. Are you playing with the manual or are you rog dogging it, right? Like, are you just going in blind? And that could be a setting where you pick, I want to play with the manual, and that'd be the equivalent of like, say, in Skyrim, you don't want the quest indicators, you don't want the line that draws you where to go. You're using the book,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that could be cool. You have fewer handholdy things. The way I one way I kind of see the book being perhaps like as a supplemental thing is how a lot of classic role playing games would do information, right? You go to a new town, you're like, oh, what's going on here? You talk to a villager, and they'll be like, I saw a monster in the Northwest Mountains. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess I should head up to the Northwest Mountains and gain some levels or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the book could be helpful in that way. I think that like making it mandatory, the only way that makes sense in my head is just really not that interesting, which would basically be like a coupon code, essentially. Right. Or if it's like, it would have a cooler skin where it'd be like, you need to go find the code of the secrets, the elder code or whatever. And but it's really like you go to a website and it gives you like a token, and then you're like, okay, this feels like I'm just getting like a 10% off a shirt or something.
Yeah.
So that's not that cool. So it's like, yeah, you really have to kind of design in and bake in some narrative stuff and like hide little Easter eggs and little secrets, in the book that pays off in the game and whatever. What's interesting
Mm-hmm.
to me is like, it sounds tempting. I'm making a game. I know how to make books. And so I could make a game and I could make a book, but it's really not even that hard of a problem. It's harder than that. Making a book and making a game are two separate problems, but making a book and making a game to go together, that is a third problem that I
Mm-hmm.
have zero experience with. And that would make both writing the book and writing the game harder for myself. So I try to think about things like that. But, one of the biggest indie fears these days is uh lack of exposure and interest and stuff. And so the book is one
Yeah.
of those ways to, poke above the crowd just a little bit. Here I
It's a differentiator.
am. Yeah, yeah. A
Um,
strange attractor, I've heard it called.
Strange attractor. Okay. What could be interesting too is when you'd go and you'd rent games. When we'd go and we'd rent games as kids, like NES games and stuff. Did they come with manuals? Did we get the whole like I don't remember if we got like a little case and the manuals in there, or
I
I think
think that
we
you
did,
could. I
right?
think they came in their own custom things that probably we would go rent at video clips, and they had these little plastic cases. I bet Nintendo sold them, or maybe some other third party company. But my memory is that it kind of snapped open. It was transparent plastic. You snapped it open, and there was room for a guide there of the Nintendo certified size, and then there's room for like you just kind of slap a game in there, a cartridge. That was
I'm
my memory.
Because if you went full if you did full embracing of the whole like retro thing, like if you did the manual for the game and you did a full kind of like you treat it as like a diegetic kind of manual. When you open up the manual, there could even be like scribblings from people who have rented the game in the past in there, and
Hmm.
you could have games like Castlevania where like you could save your progress by writing down, like heart cross dagger heart, or like whatever it was just this weird cryptic thing that you'd have to write down somewhere, and you could have it be like, well, people have written it down in the manual. So the manual could be like, okay, here and here, and maybe
Mm,
just some little drawings or doodles or whatever. Maybe they mean something,
that's
maybe they
cool.
don't. But if you go to the end, then there's a bunch of things that if you put those in, they're essentially save states. But the problem is
Yeah.
it would throw you way forward in the game, and you wouldn't know what the hell was going on. But
Yeah.
there could be things in there like, well, maybe you remember when Zelda and Metroid first came out, there were no maps in those games. You had to sit there with like graph paper.
That
Or
doesn't
that
sell
was the whole reason
magazines.
for no, that was the whole reason for Nintendo Power too. Is you'd get Nintendo Power and they would do oh, this is a
Don't
big
forget the
publishing
hotline.
company and make it a magazine. The hotline.
3.99 a minute or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but if you wanted the visualization of that, there was a magazine publisher that would print all those screens out and paste them
Absolutely.
together,
Yeah.
and you're like, wow, look, I've never seen it like that. You
It's
you could see
exactly
it
the
like that if you
same.
graph papered it, but that
Yeah.
was the only
It's the
way.
same design. It's just Nintendo had a better marketing machine and a better content pipeline. They were like, we are cranking out Nintendo Powers. Let's also crank out books, and we will sell games that sell Nintendo Powers, and we'll sell Nintendo Powers that sell games. And that's one of the reasons they're, multi-billionaire company today.
Mm-hmm.
Is that's a genius move that people like you and I would be like, okay, quick. This is expensive.
Yeah.
How do I get past Brent Star?
um, I know I've asked you before about Etrian Odyssey, and I've told you about that series before. It's the first person. It's like Eye of the Beholder view where it's a first person dungeon crawler kind of thing. It was on 3DS. It was on DS originally, and it's a dungeon crawler, but its shtick was that you had to map the dungeons yourself. So you'd use the
Yes, I
bottom
remember
touch
now.
screen to sit there and draw. You later versions let you just go, yeah. I don't care about that. Let me turn on the auto mapping feature, and then it would just draw the map for you automatically, as most games do now, where you just like if you
Ching.
when you reveal through the fog of war. Yeah, can you find one that shows the actual top and bottom screen?
Oh, top
Um,
and bottom. Yeah.
yeah, no,
Um,
if you go up, yeah, there's a couple there. Yeah, see, like the
that's
bottom
what you're
would just
talking
be
about.
this big maze. Yeah, and you had to sit there and do that with the stylus and stuff. Um,
I love that.
it was super cool. And so, like, part of the fun, at least for me, was sitting there and drawing the map as you go.
Yeah.
Like I said, you could disable that if you didn't want to play it, and then it was just a standard dungeon crawler essentially. But that was its shtick at first, was that like this is the game where if you don't do the mapping, well, guess what? You're gonna get lost because there's you're stumbling, you're fumbling your way through this map without any kind of way of knowing exactly where you are. Um,
Yeah.
so it was a cool way that they like. I like that it's a game that took the graph paper thing, the Nintendo Power thing, and kind of said, let's. That was a cool aspect of those games. Let's take that and fold that into our core concept.
Yeah. I mean, what a perfect fit for this, where you've got, your screen of action, which is the way I played. I was usually looking at this screen,
Yep.
but then you've got your touch screen, like that's a perfect combo.
Mm-hmm.
Game up top. You got party up top and scribble at the bottom.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know how you would do that nowadays, or how that would fold in with what we're talking about with a manual, but like, but you know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily, wouldn't necessarily need to be a diegetic integration of an actual physical paper manual or something, but taking something about those concepts and folding that
Yeah.
conceit into the game, into the core game design somehow.
I saw something about early days in Minecraft. One of the reasons it really took off. I mean, I should never look at Minecraft because it's just such a phenomenon, but it was the kind of community gathering around how you made stuff and what things were, because it was one of these games where they were just like, here you go, you're in a sim.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy. And you just get killed at night. And you're like, what is going on? Right. And so, the community came around and made wikis and cataloged items and voxels and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that's interesting is my second time mentioning Vlambeer in this talk, and again with Nuclear Throne, as they were developing that game live, performative development they call it, which I think is interesting. I just call it live
Mm.
streaming game dev, but I like having good names to describe what you're actually doing, right? Um, they would not name their monsters. One of the main things they would do in their live streams is add content. They would only do things that are fun to watch, not like refactoring code or whatever, right? But they wouldn't name their monsters explicitly, and they had the opportunity to do it there. They could have been like, this is, Green Goblin, here we go, new monster. And I don't know how they do their naming. Maybe it's Monster 5 or whatever, but they would explicitly let the community, they would just wait until the community would give it a nickname that would stick. And then they'd be like, there you go. That's what that's called. Mummy person, or crow monster, or whatever. And I like that a lot because, it kind of gets your players involved. Surely the players who had like participated in the nickname naming of a character in a game like that are like lifelong fans, you know, really keyed in.
That's super interesting. I love that. I love that. Don't name the stuff in the game,
Let
because
your
if you
players
think
do it.
about that, like if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, um, and you come across like, okay, it makes sense that if there is a species like goblins that live near a village and they're constantly raiding and they're like a known threat, that the people around there would have eventually given those things a name. They would call them something, or they're intelligent enough that they are able to self-name, right? But as soon as you get into things that are rare or unique, or that don't have sentience and don't have the ability to self-identify, then yeah, you are a little bit like it becomes like, why why within the fiction of this world would there be a name for this thing? Like it's not calling itself something. No one around here is familiar with what this creature is. Nobody's like seen it and cataloged it. It doesn't have a name. What is it? Like I don't know what the hell that thing is.
Yeah,
Some kind of
that's good
weird.
universe building.
Yeah, yeah. So if you know an Utieg or something like these, the more like kind of chaos beast looking things, where you're just like, you know, if you think about the world, and you're like early adventurers or something, or there was some stuff that would come through another dimension, you would see this shit and just be like, what the hell is that? You don't know what it's gonna do. You have no idea how to fight it. Like it would be, and there would have to be a naming process there, right? Like you know, if you kept coming across them, eventually you would have to start saying like, I don't know what the hell that thing is, but I need to refer to it. You know, like, and so yeah, that's brilliant. Let the players name the stuff. It would be that you would start calling it. You would name it based on what its traits were, what it did, or what it looked like, or something like that. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a
Yeah,
really cool idea to just take a game and just don't name anything. Like
yeah.
actually going back to Doom, if you just look at the game itself, if you just play the game itself, they never name anything, do they? Like why was this called an imp and that called a cacodemon and that called a, you know, a whatever?
Yeah, there
Like
might not be anything in the actual game that does that. There might be a manual that does state it explicitly.
yeah.
And my guess would be that, the developers that had making the game probably had, and some of them were named, um Cyber Demon is like just an awesome name. Someone eventually was gonna design a Cyber Demon and
Yeah.
call it that, and they were just the first geniuses to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm forgetting the
Yeah.
Cacodemon. That's
Yeah.
pretty unique. That's one of my favorites.
Um,
See, yeah.
well, because you see that with games like with the Dark Souls games or with Elden Ring or whatever, where when they first come out, like there is actually a benefit to not just uh refraining from over explaining things, but in some cases not explaining things whatsoever. You know, just going like there's a there. I know when Elden Ring first came out, there were all these different objects that you could find and equip and stuff, and people were like, "The hell does this thing do?" Like, I don't know. I put it on and there's no discernible effect. What is it? Like similar to like we've talked before about like Symphony of the Night. That game is a complete mystery. That game is a complete black box. Like there's so many objects that you can find in there and different secrets that you're just like, how the hell would anybody find that? And there's different equipment that you're just like, I don't know what this does. Like this is it's the game is not making this clear what it does. And what that does in the age of the internet is it builds up. Suddenly you get these wikis and you get communication happening online. You get people talking to each other about like, what the hell does this thing do? And you're like, oh, I don't know. Like I could swear that when I had that equipped and such happened, and then or I was attacked by this thing and then such happened, and then you get people theorizing about like, oh, maybe it increases some kind of a hidden luck stat or something like that, and you know, or has like a, maybe it's got a 10% chance to proc where it like absorbs all damage or something like that, and you get people and then you get other people coming in and going, no, that's not right, I did this and that, and like you build up all this like community around people kind of not knowing what the hell is going on. You know what I mean? And I feel like you could get that from simply not naming stuff as well. Like in the game, if you just don't ever put nameplates above stuff and you don't have any NPCs that are familiar with these creatures, then you know, and then you go like, how do we refer to this? But I don't know. There was this orange blobby thing that had like two tentacle arms sticking out the top of his head. I don't know. I don't know what that was. Like,
Yeah, I would assume that's harder to do if you are doing a manual at the same time. The whole thing being that you kind of need to name them. But I wonder
yeah.
if you did, performative development while you were making the game, and then you didn't um, put it in the book until the community had named it. You
Hmm.
could just kind of stagger there's like a delay. Like a book's a more permanent thing, so you kind of work on the game first, and then the book decides what goes. The game development decides what goes into the book, right?
I wonder if you could do if you could do some kind of a like if you could like crowdsource the names for stuff, if you could have like if the game could constantly be pinging servers and people, you've heard those stories about like how in the UK or whatever they like they would let people vote to name the names of like the snow plows and stuff, or the whole like the thing about like Bodie
Never heard of that.
McBoatface. Have you heard of Bodie McBoatface? It was like
No.
they would have like a vote, and you could like write in votes to name the name of this new boat that was like I don't remember anything about the boat. I just remember that like the community voted overwhelmingly to name this boat Bodie McBoatface or something.
Not a bad name,
and
honestly.
and if you could have a thing where like somewhere along like as people discovered creatures and they got up to a certain threshold, then people could start calling them things, and then based on an upvote or downvote system, or how many people decided to utilize that name in their personal journals or whatever, then that name becomes the assigned like or the accepted. You could be like, well, the accepted name for this is a blobicle or something, but the second next name would be called an Utieg, and then from there on you're like, nah, whatever. It's just like some way to track that in a game actually could be interesting.
Hmm.
Very similar to you could almost do in the Dark Souls games the way that you can leave little messages in the
I was going to
environment
mention that.
around. Like that's a cool
That's
feature
a lot
too. I
like the
love that.
signing that you were talking about when you rent a game. If it comes with a manual, someone who had maybe written in the
Mm,
margins or something. That's a lot like what Elden Ring has done. It's like except it's online, which is better,
yeah,
but
yeah.
not as novel anymore. So
Actually, with the manual, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, like when you come across these things in the game, if what like once you've come across five of them, if the game is like, hey, so this is clearly something that we've come across now, like this was not a one-off unique creature, like what are we going to call this? You got to write down something about the game requires that you fill a journal or something. Oh well, there's no, I don't know, what are you going to call that? And you have to like come up with your own names, your own naming convention or something, and then those
yeah,
somehow then go into a database, or and that's tracked
yeah.
somehow. And
Do you know? You've heard of No Man's Sky, right?
sure, yeah.
So I'm wondering, like maybe they have this already, but I'm just spitballing here. I wonder if there could be a kind of system where you basically as you discover new anything really anything this the game generates, you could get to name it, right? It could be like, hey, that's a brand new monster no one's discovered before, and it could be like question mark question mark question mark, right? And then you're like, all right, I get to name it, and you type in like Matt's new monster or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they have that, maybe they don't want that, I don't know. Free
Well,
idea, here it goes.
what?
You're welcome.
Yeah,
For any No Man's Sky
yeah.
developers listening, in case they hadn't implemented that,
I'm fairly sure No Man does that. No Man's Sky does that. Where,
the naming.
yeah,
I would
at
think
the
maybe at
very
least
least they do it with
planets.
Planet. Yeah, they do it with
I
planets
would
for
think
sure.
so.
Um, but obviously, then as a developer, you're biting off a whole bunch of stuff in terms of uh curating that stuff. You can't have you know
Oh,
you gotta have people, you gotta come up with a bunch of rule set, and then you gotta come up with like managing that. And
your mom planet.
yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, that's the fifth your mom planet I've stumbled upon today.
Mm-hmm.
Real original, guys.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, that's probably a problem. That's
um
definitely a problem.
what's the thing in Elden Ring, the um
I've never, I've never played a Souls game.
but have you seen the
I
meme
mean,
though?
I've
Have you
just a
seen the
little bit.
like I think it's like tri-finger butthole or something like that. So like, do you know about that meme?
No, I don't
So
know what you're
when you
talking
leave
about.
little signposts around, you could leave, you're not able to just free input text. You're able to put in like sentence fragments, and they control what fragments are in what order or whatever. And so it's like, okay, drop down box, drop down box. I haven't played it either. I know people have been yelling at me for months that I need to play it, but essentially one of the things that somebody finally came up with was the word try, uh, and then finger was one of the options, and then butt as in but, not buttocks, and then hole. So it was like try finger butt hole, like, and that was the like hint that they left. And that just turned into a meme of like, okay, I'm looking for useful information. I'm going to reveal this, and it says try finger butthole. And you're like,
This is
thanks.
why we can't have nice things. This is why the internet is a cesspool. This is why there's graffiti all over. This is why the Mona Lisa is behind bulletproof glass.
Yeah.
This is why I remember reading this story about how Yellowstone National Park, it has these glorious, like colored, beautiful water that's colored by these rare types of bacteria and whatever fauna and whatnot, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's this area where it was all dying and they couldn't figure out why. And it's because people would show up and just throw pennies into it because when humans are near a body of water, they will throw their least expensive currency into it for some reason.
Yeah.
And copper was killing the very delicate bacteria, and
Yep.
so the colors changed, and it's like, this is, humans are radioactive, right? Like, we
Yeah.
will, anything that we can desecrate, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I think we've talked about that online before because yeah, Yellowstone is such a fascinating, just psychological and sociological
It's like a
experiment.
giant state park petri dish in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. I have not been. I really want to go.
We
All right, I'm going right now.
um when did we go there? Did we go there before you were born? We
You went as a Hackett family?
Yeah, we went as a family.
Maybe I did go. I was just
You maybe you were just like a toddler or something. I don't remember.
hmm.
I was I remember it was when we were very young. I don't even know if Mike would
I
have
have no
memories of
brain
it.
wrinkles to help me
The
remember this.
faintest memory I have of it is going to there's this giant lodge next to the Old Faithful geyser, and in this whole field between the two, there was all these groundhogs, and it was just a field covered with holes, and they were used to people, but they would like pop up out of the hole. It was like whack-a-mole. Like basically you'd be like, ooh,
Fun.
the kids trying to run after the little groundhogs, and they'd go down and then pop up another hole and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
just seeing, I remember the place was super stinky because there's lots of these like sulfur pits and stuff. So the smells of this place are all over the
Yeah.
place, and just huge, lots of color, lots of weird boiling mud and stuff. And yeah, but people don't know what to do there, and people don't understand that it's very fragile. They don't understand that it's very dangerous. And so yeah, people will think that like, oh, it's like a Japanese bath thing, right? Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna take off my shoes and socks and go into this like, oh god, I'm boiling, and then they like sink in, and
Yeah, I've
their
heard multiple
flesh
people have
boils off their
jumped
skin.
in. Yeah, multiple people have jumped into those because it just looks inviting, and they've
Yeah,
just burned to death because it's like a 300 degrees Fahrenheit or something.
yeah,
And I'm like, I'm not jumping into any unknown body of water. No,
yeah,
no,
yeah. But anyway,
not for me.
no. Uh, hmm. Yeah, I love that though. The not naming stuff. That's it. That's very interesting. I like that because that's a limitation, right? It's one of those things where you're like take it's one less thing Dev's got to do, and then if you take that and you fold in somehow, you go like, all right, well, we're not going to do that. Well then, but what do we do instead? And like folding that into the gameplay somehow, like saying, hey player, we're gonna like put this on you, and here's how it's been, and here's how that new responsibility of yours has been integrated, or um, I don't know. That's a cool idea, like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like you too. That's a keeper.
That is a keeper.
Goes in the old bookmarks.
Tunic did an interesting thing there too with the whole. I would say that that game still has tutorials in the traditional sense, but they did a really interesting thing where they don't utilize English. They don't utilize any language, and they do it all via pictures and pictograms and stuff. And
Love it.
I thought that was super interesting. And they do a little bit of they do introduce it in a it's they don't diegetically do it as a manual, do they? But they do introduce it as like things that have been written or painted onto paper or onto little things within the world, right? So they don't do it as a game manual, but they do it as this is stuff that exists in the world that you have to absorb, you have to look at and kind of translate and grok. And so that's a cool. I like it. I like how they did it. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's genius because it's simple and also easier probably for them to localize and implement. just across the board, just to win.
Localization can be a nightmare, right? So if you can find a way to sidestep localization, hey man, like good
That's
on you.
right.
That's
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing dialogue in my next game because it's like a village simulator type situation where it could be like Animal Crossing where the villagers are like blah 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 blah. It's kind of what I was thinking, sort of. But then I was like, I don't want to write a bunch of dialogue.
Mm,
I actually enjoy making dialogue systems. I think they're kind of fun to make. It's rewarding to just you can real quickly have the text appear, and then it's not that hard to be like but you have it right out over time. And I even like doing things like this. I've implemented this in Unity and other projects, but you can like have it take a character and generate a sound from it, and you can feed it with different levers. So you could have one character go like and another one that sounds like kind of like how Animal Crossing does.
yep.
And so I made a system like that because I thought I was going to need it, but the more I got in development, I was like, cut it, no dialogue, none.
Yeah.
Instead, what I'm doing is the bubbles that appear above heads, and it's like a little pointer, and it'll be like just like an icon. The way I'm handling that now is I was actually picturing I was going to do kind of like thought bubbles, but the way I'm doing it now is I'm using basically a state system, and so it'll be like, oh, you have the anger state, and so the icon will just pop up, and if you also have the love state, that'll pop up too. You can be angry and in love at the same time, and then if they can be permanent states, but if they have timers, the number will appear as
Mm-hmm.
well. And so I think in my case and for my game, that's enough information for me to get across, which would just be like, is this villager angry at you or not? Like that's all you really want to know.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be doing things that involve things like you need to know the villagers telling you to go, you know, go look at those mountains like we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
right? Go look at I saw a monster in the northwest. There's no task that my villagers need to handle. There's no reason for the dialogue to exist. I recognize it would be more content and maybe some players are looking for that so they can have something to read and they like that. But I think for me in my games, I'm like, I can cut that and I can focus on the action and the gameplay
Cut
and just
that.
use
Cut that. Cut that.
icons. Cut that, cut that, cut that, cut that.
Yeah, it would be really cool to do I like that idea too. The whole just do all of your storytelling or all of your communication of the wants and desires of the NPCs through pictures. Like essentially it'd be like doing it like the Sims, right? Where they just you walk up to two Sims are having a conversation and they just get little thought bubbles above their head of like various icons of like that's what's on their mind. And the cool side effect is that I love when games have funny gibberish. Like what you just described about doing just various pitches and alterations of kind of I love the Animal Crossing sounds, the little laugh, the little laugh sound that they make, and all of
Yep.
the Simlish stuff that they do in the Sims. That stuff's
Same.
hilarious. It's so fun to listen to, and if you get that along with a little boop, a little pop up of like, if you walk up to a villager and they're just like, and they say this and a little icon of like bread comes over their head or something, and you're like, all right, they want some bread. And
Yeah.
then if you walk up and you give them a piece of fish or something, and they're like, and they make like a little sound and a little kind of, one of those like kind of squiggles, pencil squiggle kind of
Yeah.
comes over their head, then it's very clear. Like, and you don't need to localize, but you're getting across stuff about what you get that feeling of like, oh, these are like deep little characters. And it can literally just be like, there's three things in a plus column and three things in a negative column for each one of these NPCs. And based on that, they all feel like they've got, as a human, when you play it, you'll just see these, okay, that's a pro, that's a con, but you will then kind of overlay like a personality. You'll kind of take your own, you'll start to think of them as little people that have personalities and that they're
Definitely.
unique and stuff. So yeah, I love that. I think that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
It could, I mean, it seems like if you do it in a like just with pure icons, and you reduce the scope of that, like that could be a thing. Like if you can get the scope down to a certain point, then that to me seems like that the benefit could absolutely outweigh the scope of biting that off to begin with, as opposed to doing full dialogue trees and localization and all that stuff. Ugh.
Yeah. 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 In my game, I just need the villagers to feel real enough. It's pretty low bar. You know what I mean? I need them to not be like bumping up against a wall like an idiot, and I need him to feel like a little alive, just enough to be like, yeah, sure. I get villager vibes from that sprite. Like that's all I
Right.
need. I don't need, advanced AI and, generative AI dialogue and stuff like that.
No, no. Um, so let's talk about a schedule because we've been going for about an hour 35. This probably is going to end up being our shortest stream so far, but that's fine. We're
But
trying
still,
different
that's still movie length,
times.
baby.
It is movie length.
That's longer than my entire tutorial package.
um, yeah, because we got to find a sweet spot in terms of like, do we do this in the evening? Do we do it in the afternoon, weekday, weekend? We don't know. We don't know what we're doing. We're still just doing this in terms of like, hey, bro, you online? You want to stream? Sure. What the hell? Like that's our complete strategy so far.
It's a
um,
winning strategy.
it, well,
Yeah, but if people want to tune in, the only way we're ever going to be able to set that up is if we actually have a reliable schedule. So people,
yeah,
otherwise, it's like roll the dice. Oh, you were busy that day. Well, we really
yeah,
didn't give you the opportunity to plan ahead.
right. Well, Vincent,
Uh,
Vincent popped in, and I don't even know if Vincent's still with us, but he must have just been online
oh, I
at
didn't
the
even tweet
time.
about it or anything. So yeah,
Mm.
I did. Hang on, did I?
Yeah, we're really relying on like somebody being on Twitch, having and just either going into the category and scrolling down and finding us
Oh,
all the
you
way at the
did.
bottom.
I see. You tweeted at me an hour ago. I just didn't see it. Yeah, I just slipped my mind. That probably would have helped get some people in here.
Yeah,
Whoops.
but
But yeah, schedule would help with that a lot.
yeah, I mean because we're also starting every stream with like, oh, we should tweet. Like, we can do that early if we know. Yeah, I mean,
We
this
can
is
start just
this
saying
is
Sundays.
major duh category here of like, yeah, you need a schedule. Numbnuts, like, duh.
Yeah.
Um,
But
so
we
yeah,
could start with
we got to get
Sundays
there.
and then zero in on it. I've been thinking about sending out a survey to my tweets,
Mm,
um, asking when people will be available because I need to start doing more.
yeah,
Gotta start streaming my next game soon.
yeah, because I know you're gonna be streaming on Vladria, right? You're gonna start doing like actual game dev streams and
Yeah,
stuff
and
like
I
that,
might.
right?
I still haven't decided. I might use my personal Twitch. I don't know, but it's definitely gonna go to the Vladria YouTube.
Right.
I don't know. I'm being weird about it.
Yeah. So we gotta. I mean, because that's your thing. I'm working every day doing I've got a 9 to 5, so like it's probably going to be in the evenings, but it's like, do we do it? We've streamed once where we were streaming from like 11 to 2 in the morning. That's Pacific time. That's probably less than ideal. So yeah, like if you do a survey and ping people and they, that'd be interesting to know. Like, are they more interested in 7 to 9 PST? Um,
I got
later
a lot of friends in Europe,
in the week.
John, in Australia,
Yeah. So
other
what does
side of
that
the
mean?
globe.
So what does that mean? Does that mean 2 in the morning is actually good for them because they can catch it in the mornings? Because there'll be like, I mean, the
Maybe.
UK is like 8 hours after us, right? Or
Yeah, I
something.
think
I
that's
don't even
right.
know.
I think that's right.
Um, yeah, whatever.
Australia, it's like next week over there. It's
Yeah,
it's a whole other world.
yeah. Australia and Japan, they're like, it's already Monday. Like they're already about to get lunch on Monday or something.
Yeah, I think so.
They live in the future.
Exactly right. But we'll
Um,
figure it out.
yeah, we will figure it out.
Sundays are generally pretty open for me, so we'll see.
Yeah. Um, yeah. All right. Well, I want to work around your schedule, and we both need to work with our wives to figure out when is a reliable time. But yeah,
Wives and
we'll
work,
find a time, and we'll
two
kind of
W's.
commit to that for a little while, so that we can then tweet ahead of time and be like, "Hey, this is what we'll be doing." And if we get a schedule, then we can actually get a little bit out of the kind of like just impromptu
But there's
nature
always
of
the
this.
video on demand. I think that's something we talked about. Is you can we record these, and the benefit really is that like now that they can just appear on YouTube, and
Yeah.
everybody's lives are busy. It's hard to be like I can actually be there on time. It's more of a like, hey, I happen to be available. Cool, right?
Yep.
But they're on YouTube later. I like to catch up with the videos. I'll like put them on the background cooking a meal or something.
Oh yeah, I do too. I spend a lot of time on YouTube just listening to stuff. So yeah, for sure, people can do that and they can leave
A
comments
lot of my
there. They
podcast
can,
listeners will be doing their dishes or going for a run,
yeah.
and they listen
Hmm.
to me talk. I'm sure this is
Um,
no different.
oh, you know what I realized this time too? I just now realized this. Why did I did not have I didn't have any music going this whole time. Last couple
Do
times
you
I've
do
been
that through
playing that
Twitch or do you do that through OBS or what do you?
I have a start playing it now.
Good timing.
Yeah.
Actually,
As
I
we're
that's
signing
when I
off.
play music. I play music. I play people out of my podcasts.
I can just slowly increase the volume until we sign off. Um,
By the end, it's all you hear is you just hear like loud.
it's too cranked up, and I dial us down, so we're just like, and then I'll fade the screen to black, yeah. No, I just
Great.
run it in a YouTube tab, and I just turn the sound down because I don't have any kind of sound mixer or anything.
Hey man, whatever works, right?
Because we don't know what we're doing.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Well, are we winding down here?
Yeah, I think we should wind down.
Let me show you what I've got. I have a
What do you have?
here we go. I have a be right back, and I have a stream starting soon. I don't have a see you next time or something.
Yeah, I guess you need a
I need to
smell you later.
smell you later. Yeah, I gotta add a few more of those. But that's what I've got. I'm preparing
Yeah.
soon, man. I've been putting it off. I've been working on other projects, podcasts and tutorials
Mm-hmm.
and books and whatever. But I can't put it off forever. I got to make another game.
Yeah. And then also, like I was saying, we need to find out, can we share these scenes? Like, because it's been me hosting so far, but like if we had a shared pool of scenes, then it could just be like, well, whichever one of us, either one of us can host or whatever the hell. I don't know. I don't know that matters.
Oh, when you saying I could host when we stream?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could. Mm-hmm.
Not that it matters. Not that this is hard or anything. But yeah,
You
also
just,
like,
you miss your virtual camera. That's one way to get it is by not hosting.
yeah.
Virtual camera is pretty sweet.
I own a virtual camel.
You know, virtual camel sounds amazing. See here, I'm going to turn my border off just because I can. Virtual camera.
Oh my
baby.
God.
Oh wait. You want a real thick weird border? Let's get that going. It's got intimate.
I could go to this one where, whoa, no, I won't go to that. I could go to our different drawing scenes.
Drawings. Oh, those are real good.
Yeah. Okay. Schedule. We'll get better at this.
Sundays are looking good.
Sundays are looking like it's probably going to be a thing.
Let me ask the people who would tune in when they would tune in.
Yeah, like Sunday. Should we do it at Sunday at 7, Sunday at 8? Because like we started today at what, 3:30 or something, which is a little weird. Like who's at their computer at 3:30 in the afternoon on a Sunday? I don't know. But you're right. People can tune into all the videos afterwards and let us know in the comments or tweet at us or whatever.
I've heard some
let
people
us
have
know
as well. Yeah,
Hmm?
people are watching them.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good.
Cool.
Well, hello, watchers. What do they
We
call? Oh,
appreciate
they call them creeps on Always Sunny.
Creeps.
People who watch as opposed to listen, they call them the creeps.
The creeps. They're the jackals on corrections. Although they have to participate and correct you. What was I going to say? Oh, well, I think we'll have more structure as we go. Was this our fourth stream?
Fourth.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I think in the future, there's some things that interest me. Someday we should do some game development together.
Yeah.
Once I get into the rhythm, maybe I could work on my next game while you're hanging out and I could show you some stuff and you could give me suggestions or something. We definitely want to do some dual drawing. We're both drawing the same stuff. I have some art prompts. We have some art prompts.
Mm-hmm.
Also, once I get cranking on my game, you could start to play it. I could give you a build and I could tell you what's new and you could go and play it. Give me feedback.
Yeah,
Help me
yeah.
make a good game.
Mm-hmm.
Because pretty soon here, yeah, I'll be streaming.
Yeah. Find something
With
we
a
can
pretty
do
aggressive
collaboratively.
schedule.
Oh, hello, Checksours. We are just signing off. Sorry, but we were just talking about how this stuff gets stuck on VOD on Twitch, and it's also we're casting to YouTube as well, and YouTube just saves that stuff
It'll be on
forever.
Yeah. Here.
So
Hold
feel
on,
free to
I'll
go.
link.
You can watch this episode and the other 3 that we've done. Whatever the hell this. This isn't even an episode.
Episode.
It's not an episode because
Shatasode.
we're not overlaying any kind of a structure or anything to this. But although you make the good point that maybe we should. I don't know. We'll
I
see
mean,
what
I think some
happens.
structure is nice because, like, when you talk about it, it's like, let's say you happen to be around on a Sunday and you see a tweet that's like, hey, I'm streaming with my brother. That's what I've done before. And it's like, okay. But if it's like, hey, we're going to have a little drawing competition, or, we're going to work on this game called this, or something
Yeah.
concrete. I mean, that's what draws me in. Sometimes you just want to hang out. Like, oh, that's some bros hanging out, sure. But, give some structure. And, like, there's also, I think, some stuff we actually want to get done, right? Like, you know, I want us to make more art for the channel.
Yeah.
And what was the other thing? There was something. Oh, I want us to play specific games. I will get you to play Spelunky someday. And I want to play Into the Breach pretty soon. And
Mm-hmm.
then maybe we'll play Half-Life 2, or maybe you should walk me through some other AAA games that I've missed out on, because there's all of them at
Yeah,
this point.
that would be one way to do it too. Is the like rather than getting one of us getting the other to play a game, the other one person could give the other a tour of the game, a quick tour of it.
Yeah.
I could be like, here, let me show you this level from The Last of Us 2 or something like that.
Hmm.
As opposed to, here, because it's one thing to like play Spelunky for an hour, but like if it was like, hey man, I want you to play The Last of Us for an hour. What?
I
Like
might
that?
learn the controls by then.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you're talking
Actually,
about
that's
it's a
not even
30
true. I bet
hour
I wouldn't. I
narrative
bet it'd be
game,
45 minutes of cutscenes, wouldn't it? I bet it would.
the
The
first
first hour, I bet.
15, 20
I
minutes
would
of
put money
Last of
down.
Us is cutscene. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I don't play those games as much. What's fun about Spelunky 2, either Spelunky really, is within 1 hour you can see the whole game. But you're amazing if you can do that, because it's such a the challenge is incredible. I can't do it.
Yep.
I've beaten Spelunky 2 the hard way, but it took me like 3.5 hours.
Hmm.
And I can't do it again. I've tried many times. Like I will someday. I can do it, but anyway,
Right on.
Spelunky. That's all I gotta say.
All right. Well, let's leave it at that for now, and we'll yeah, I think at the very least we'll do this again next weekend.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks for hanging out.
Yep. I'm gonna stop the stream right about
Ooh,
now.
transition.